bus lurched to a stop in northeastern Tennessee, its brakes hissing like a tired beast. I stepped onto the cracked asphalt of the station lot, my duffel bag slung over one shoulder, its weight a familiar anchor. In my right hand, the rifle case felt cool and smooth, a relic of hunts long past. The station was a squat, single-story brick building, its paint peeling in curls like dead leaves. The sign above the entrance faded to a whisper of its former self. 10 years had passed since I last stood here, yet the place was unchanged, as if time had forgotten this corner of the world. Beyond the lot, the mountains rose, their slopes cloaked in trees that shimmered with the first hints of autumn's fire, gold and crimson bleeding into green. Michael's blue pickup waited, its dented fender catching the late afternoon sun. He leaned against the driver's door, arms crossed, his silhouette sharp against the forested horizon. As I approached, his face split into a grin, though his eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't name, wariness, perhaps, or the weight of years. "Jim Wilson," he called, striding forward. "About damn time." We shook hands, the grip firm, then pulled each other into a quick, back-slapping hug that carried the ghosts of our younger selves. "Good to see you, Mike," I said, tossing my bags into the truck bed. The metal clanged, a hollow sound swallowed by the quiet of the small town. Michael's beard was streaked with gray now, his eyes etched with lines that hadn't been there a decade ago. But his grin was the same, easy, warm, a tether to memories of deer trails and campfire nights. "Been too long," he said, climbing into the driver's seat. The cab smelled of stale coffee, gun oil, and a pine-scented air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror, a scent that tugged me back to our old hunting trips. "When you called about hunting the old grounds, I thought you were joking." The engine growled to life, and we pulled onto the main road, the town slipping past in a blur of sagging porches and faded storefronts. "How was the bus ride?" Michael asked, his eyes flicking to me before returning to the road. "Long, boring. Cheaper than flying," I said, rolling down the window. The autumn air rushed in, sharp with pine and the faint musk of decaying leaves. "Army pension doesn't stretch far." He nodded, navigating the curves with the ease of someone who'd driven these roads his whole life. "How long's it been since you got out?" 3 years, I said, watching the countryside unfold. Fields dotted with hay bales, scattered farms with barns leaning under the weight of time. The mountains loomed closer, their shadows stretching across the land. "Still feels strange, being a civilian." Michael had rooted himself here while I wandered. He was manager at the hardware store now, married to Lisa from high school, with 2 boys who were probably tearing through the house as we spoke. I hadn't settled down, never found the right time or person. My years in the army, Afghanistan, Iraq, places too classified for names, had left me with a restlessness that didn't fit in one place. Security consulting paid the bills, but it was a hollow echo of the clarity I'd found in a mission structure, the certainty of a target. The road narrowed, asphalt giving way to dirt as we entered Cherokee National Forest. Trees pressed close, oak and hickory woven with pine, their branches scraping the truck like fingers testing its resolve. The air grew cooler, heavy with the scent of sap and earth. Michael's voice broke the silence. "These woods, Jim, same area we used to hunt. You remember how good the deer were?" I nodded, picturing the trails we'd walked as younger men, the thrill of tracking a buck through dawn's mist. But his grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles paling. "There's something you should know," he said, his tone shifting, like a man stepping onto thin ice. "Been some strange stories about these woods lately." I raised an eyebrow, my curiosity piqued. "What kind?" He forced a laugh, but it was brittle, unconvincing. "Small town stuff, people disappearing, weird animal behavior, strange sounds at night. Just local superstition, really? Disappearing?" Pressed. In my years overseas, I'd heard similar tales in remote villages. Whispers of things in the dark, dismissed as folklore but often laced with truth no one wanted to face. "A few hikers, a hunter or two," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "Big forest. People get lost, wander off trail, you know how it is." "Most of them." I caught the hesitation in his voice, the way it snagged on the word most. He sighed, the sound heavy with reluctance. There was this guy, Rick Martinez, good hunter, knew these woods like his own backyard. Came back from a trip a few years ago, said something attacked his group. His friends didn't come back. Rick wasn't right after that, drew weird pictures, talked nonsense. Then he vanished from his house one day. I studied Michael's face, the tension in his jaw betraying his attempt to sound casual. You believe any of it? He laughed again, this time more genuine, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on, Jim. You know me, just small town talk. People get bored, make up stories to scare themselves. I didn't respond, my mind turning over his words. In my experience, local legends often carried fragments of truth, especially in places like this, where the wilderness pressed close, its shadows whispering to those who lived in its orbit. The forest thickened around us, the road growing rougher, branches scraping the truck's sides like a warning. We reached a small clearing, marked by a weathered wooden sign that barely read Trailhead. Michael cut the engine, the silence rushing in like a tide. End of the road, he said. We walk from here. We unloaded our gear. My backpack heavy with tent, sleeping bag, cooking supplies, food, and extra ammunition, a force of habit from my military days. Michael slung his pack on, grabbing his rifle with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times. 3 miles to the base camp I picked out, he said. Then another mile or two to where I've seen deer sign. I secured my rifle case to my pack. Lead the way. The trail was narrow at first, widening as we plunged deeper into the forest. The air was cool under the canopy, the ground a mosaic of fallen leaves and pine needles that crunched under our boots. Sunlight pierced the trees in slanted beams, painting the forest floor with shifting patterns of light and shadow. But something felt wrong, a subtle discord I couldn't immediately place. It's quiet, I said after a mile, my voice low, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something. Michael glanced back, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? The birds. These woods used to be alive with them, warblers, finches, crows. Now it's just us. He paused, listening. The forest was still, save for the faint creak of branches in the breeze. Yeah, it's a bit quiet. Probably the time of year. Or that storm last week pushed them elsewhere. I wasn't convinced. A silent forest was a warning sign, one I'd learned to heed in places where silence meant predators, or worse. In Afghanistan, a quiet village could signal an ambush. Here, it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. We hiked on, the trail sloping upward, our packs growing heavier with each step. The sun dipped lower, casting the woods in a golden glow that felt more like a warning than a comfort. Michael pointed through a gap in the trees. Small plateau up ahead, good water source nearby, decent cover. Should have a nice view too, but as we crested the rise, he stopped so abruptly I nearly collided with him. What is it? I asked, stepping beside him. The clearing wasn't empty as he'd promised. 3 tents stood in a rough semicircle around a stone-ringed fire pit. Camping chairs were arranged nearby, a folding table holding plates with half-eaten meals, the food crusted and molding. Flies buzzed lazily, their drone the only sound in the stillness. A pot sat on a small camping stove, its contents charred to a blackened crust. 3 backpacks leaned against tree trunks, their zippers undisturbed. A deck of playing cards lay scattered on the ground, as if dropped mid-game. This wasn't here when I scouted, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Someone set up since then. I scanned the clearing, my military instincts flaring. The scene was wrong. Not chaotic, not ransacked, but frozen, like a photograph abandoned mid-moment. No voices, no movement, no signs of life. Hello, Michael called, his voice echoing through the trees, unanswered. Let's check it out, I said, moving forward cautiously. My boots crunched on the leaves, each step deliberate, as if the ground might betray me. Up close, the details sharpened. The food had been sitting for days, maybe a week, the beans and meat furred with mold. The pot's contents were unrecognizable, a blackened mass that smelled faintly of decay. The gear was standard mid-range tents, well-used backpacks, nothing to suggest wealth or inexperience. But the stillness was oppressive, a weight that pressed against my chest. "Looks like they just walked away," I said, my eyes tracing the scene. In the middle of dinner, Michael picked up a plate, grimacing at the moldy remnants. "This has been here a while, days at least." I circled the camp, noting the details. 3 tents for 3 campers, a bear bag hung high in a tree, its food supplies untouched. "No one leaves camp without water or supplies," I said. "Not unless they had no choice." "Should we check the tents?" Michael asked, his voice tight. I nodded, though the act felt like violating a grave. The first tent held a neatly laid out sleeping bag, a small pile of clothes folded beside it, a spare shirt, socks, a worn baseball cap. The second was similar, with a paperback novel open face down, its spine cracked, as if the reader had stepped away mid-sentence. The third tent had 2 sleeping bags, suggesting a couple, their personal items arranged with care. A pair of glasses, a half-empty water bottle, a small photo of 2 people smiling in a sunlit field. "Normal camping stuff," Michael said, backing out of the last tent. "No clue why they'd leave. No wallets or phones," I noted. "They took personal items, at least. Identification, maybe." Michael bent down, picking up a small notebook from beside a camping chair. "Hunting journal," he said, flipping through it. "Says they got here 5 days ago. Last entry was 3 days back." He handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine, cold and trembling. The handwriting was neat, almost fastidious, detailing weather conditions, game sightings, and a note about an 8-point buck spotted in the area. The final entry was mundane. "Good weather today, saw the buck again, might try for it tomorrow." No mention of distress, no hint of plans to abandon camp. "These people just vanished," I said, the words heavy, sinking into the silence. "No animal attack, no panic. They just left everything." Michael rubbed the back of his neck, his discomfort palpable. "Maybe an emergency? Left in a hurry." I shook my head, my mind racing through scenarios. None of them good. Emergencies don't work like that. You grab what you can carry, water, food, something. This looks like they stood up and walked into the trees. 30 yards from the camp, near the clearing's edge, I spotted something hanging from a tree branch. "Mike," I called, keeping my voice steady despite the unease curling in my gut. He joined me, and we stood before a deer carcass, field-dressed but wrong. The cuts were too precise, almost surgical, the edges clean as if sliced by a machine. A perfect circular incision, 3 inches wide, marred its abdomen, the wound's edges smooth, without the jagged hesitation of a knife. "You ever see a hunting knife make a cut like that?" I asked, pointing to the circle. Michael stepped closer, his breath catching. "No, too perfect. Like it was done with a tool, circular saw, maybe." He didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. The wound was unnatural, its precision chilling, as if it belonged to a ritual rather than a hunt. The abandoned camp, the mutilated deer. My instincts screamed that we were standing in the middle of something deeply wrong, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit human logic. "We should move on," I said, turning away from the carcass. "Find another spot to camp." Michael nodded, relief flashing across his face. "There's another clearing 2 miles up the trail. We can make it before dark." We left the camp untouched, its emptiness a weight that followed us. As we hiked, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on my back, a prickling sensation that made me glance over my shoulder every few steps. The forest was too quiet, the absence of birdsong a void that pressed against my eardrums. Rick Martinez's story gnawed at me. His friends gone, his mind unraveled, his disappearance from a locked house. I didn't mention it to Michael. No need to feed the fear growing between us. The new clearing was tactically sound. Flat ground, a stream gurgling nearby, a rock formation at our backs offering cover from unseen threats. We set up camp with the efficiency of old partners, pitching tents, digging a fire pit, and organizing gear in the fading light. Years of hunting together made the process automatic. a ritual that grounded us against the day's unease. As darkness fell, we sat by the fire, eating jerky and rehydrated stew, the flames casting long shadows that danced across the trees. Neither of us spoke of the abandoned camp or the deer's strange wound, but the silence was heavy, charged with unspoken dread. "Early start tomorrow?" I asked, breaking the quiet. "Yeah," Michael said, staring into the fire, its glow deepening the lines on his face. "There's a ridge a mile north. Deer pass through the valley below regularly." I added wood to the fire, watching sparks spiral into the night. The forest was silent. No owls, no rustling of nocturnal creatures, just the crackle of flames and the occasional breeze. Michael turned in first, his footsteps fading into his tent. I stayed by the fire, my thoughts circling the abandoned camp. People didn't walk away from their gear, their food, their shelter without reason. In my military days, I'd seen camps abandoned in panic, supplies scattered, tents torn, signs of flight. This was different, deliberate, as if the campers had been called away by something they couldn't resist. I crawled into my tent, placing my hunting knife beside my sleeping bag and leaning my rifle against the wall, its weight a small comfort. Sleep came in fragments, broken by every creak of a branch, every whisper of leaves in the wind. Each time, my hand found the knife before I was fully awake, my body reacting faster than my mind. In the quiet moments, I saw the deer's circular wound, its precision haunting me, a mark that didn't belong to any tool I knew. When I drifted off, I dreamed of empty chairs, half-eaten meals, and figures walking into the forest, their footsteps swallowed by silence. A scream tore through the night, yanking me from sleep. It was neither animal nor human, a guttural, mechanical wail that clawed at the edges of my sanity, lingering in the air like a physical thing. I froze, my heart hammering, my breath shallow as I strained to hear beyond it. The forest was silent again, oppressively so. No insects, no birds, just the echo of that cry ringing in my skull. I grabbed my knife and rifle, unzipping my tent slowly, the sound loud in the stillness. Michael stood outside, pale in the fire's dying embers, his eyes wide as he stared at the treeline. "You heard it?" I said, keeping my voice low, as if speaking too loudly might summon it again. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the dense wall of trees. "Woke me right up." The air was colder than it should have been, raising goosebumps on my arms, the chill sinking into my bones. "Mountain lion?" I suggested, though I knew better. I'd heard big cats scream in the Rockies, their cries eerily human, but this was deeper, more alien, with a metallic edge that didn't belong in nature. "That's no cat," Michael whispered, his voice trembling. "That's what took those people." The words hung between us, heavy with a truth neither of us wanted to face. I rebuilt the fire, kneading its light and warmth against the darkness that pressed in from all sides. The flames flared, casting flickering shadows that seemed to move with intent. "We should keep watch," I said, feeding larger logs into the pit. "Take shifts until morning." Michael nodded, sitting heavily on a log we dragged to the fire, his hands trembling as he reached for his canteen. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" I asked, settling across from him, my rifle across my knees. He stared into the flames, the shadows deepening the lines on his face, aging him in the firelight. "Remember Rick Martinez?" he said finally, his voice low. "He was a friend, not close, but we hunted together a few times. His group went missing in these woods, same area. When he came back alone 3 days later, he was different. Kept talking about something in the forest, too tall, too thin, moving too fast. Said it screamed like what we heard tonight." I leaned forward, the fire's heat doing little to warm the chill in my bones. "What else?" "He drew pictures," Michael said, his eyes distant, "covered his walls with them. Always the same thing, a tall, thin creature with circular markings like the wound on that deer. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just drew and talked about how it moved wrong, like it wasn't really there. Then he vanished. Door locked, windows shut. Sheriff found drawings everywhere, walls, ceiling, scratched into the floor. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, trying to keep the accusation from my voice. "I thought it was just stories," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. "Rick had problems before, drank too much, got into fights. Easy to think he was just messed up, in shock from losing his friends. But that sound," he trailed off, fear etching his features. "That's exactly how he described it. And those campers we found, they vanished just like Rick's friends." I added another log to the fire, the flames roaring higher, their light pushing back the darkness but not the dread. My military training urged me to assess the threat, to categorize it enemy, terrain, tactics. But my gut told me this was beyond anything I'd faced, beyond human understanding. "We head back in the morning," I said. "Report the camp. Let the authorities handle it." Michael nodded, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. Neither of us believed the authorities could handle what we'd stumbled into. I took first watch, rifle ready, my eyes scanning the treeline. The night stretched endlessly, every rustle of leaves spiking my pulse, every shadow seeming to shift with purpose. But nothing came. No screams, no movement, just the oppressive silence of a forest that knew more than it told. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong, the forest waking as if the night's terror had been a dream. Michael emerged from his tent, his eyes bloodshot, dark circles carved beneath them. "Anything?" he asked, his voice rough. "Quiet," I said. "Too quiet." We ate breakfast in silence, the normalcy of instant coffee and energy bars a fragile shield against the previous night's fear. The routine grounded us, but it couldn't erase the memory of that scream or the abandoned camp. "Still want to head back?" Michael asked, sipping his coffee. I hesitated. Daylight dulled the fear, and the long drive to get here tugged at my resolve. My military training bristled at the idea of retreating from an unseen threat, and the hunter in me recoiled at abandoning a trip we'd planned for months. "We came to hunt," I said finally, though doubt gnawed at me. "Seems a shame to turn back now." Michael's surprise mirrored my own uncertainty. "After everything? That scream could have been an animal," I said, the words hollow even to me. "People go missing in forests all the time. Lost, injured, medical emergencies. One day of hunting, then we leave tomorrow." He didn't look convinced but nodded slowly. "We stick together. No splitting up." We packed light, water, food, extra ammunition, and set out for the ridge Michael had mentioned, a mile north. The forest felt alive again, birds calling, sunlight filtering through the canopy in golden streams. But the memory of that scream lingered, a shadow that daylight couldn't banish. I kept my rifle close, its weight a false comfort, my senses sharpened by years in hostile territories. Every snapped twig, every rustle in the underbrush, made my heart lurch. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of eyes hidden in the dark spaces between trees. The ridge was perfect for hunting. A clear view of the valley below, a fallen oak offering cover. We settled behind it, using the mossy trunk to steady our rifles. For an hour, we waited in silence. The forest sounds a deceptive lullaby. The sun inched across the sky, shifting the patterns of light and shadow on the ground. My eyes darted from the clearing to the darker parts of the forest, the silence from the night before still echoing in my mind. "Look," Michael whispered, tapping my arm. A buck emerged from the trees, its antlers gleaming in the sun. An 8-pointer, maybe 10, its muscular frame moving with cautious grace. My pulse quickened as I raised my rifle, the crosshairs settling behind its shoulder. I steadied my breath, finger brushing the trigger. Then a roar erupted behind the buck, wild and unnatural. A sound that shook the air and clawed at my nerves. I flinched, my shot going wide. The buck bolted, blood flecking the leaves as it vanished into the trees. "What the hell was that?" I whispered, scanning the treeline where the sound had come from. My hands were cold, a chill creeping up my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Michael's face was ashen, his eyes wide. "We need to go. Now." We grabbed our gear and hurried back to camp, the forest's normalcy shattered. The roar had been the same as the night's scream, closer now, more immediate, its mechanical edge cutting through my thoughts. At camp, we packed essentials, water, food, ammunition, leaving the tents behind. But I stopped, the image of the wounded buck flashing in my mind, its blood staining the leaves. Mike, that buck's suffering. We can't leave it. He stared at me, incredulous. Are you serious? After what we heard? It's not right, I insisted, clinging to the hunter's code despite the dread pooling in my gut. We finish it clean, then we leave. He ran a hand through his hair, torn between fear and principle. Fine, he said finally. We follow the blood trail, put it down, then we get the hell out. No detours. We followed the trail, rifles ready, the crimson drops bright against the fallen leaves. The forest grew denser, the trees ancient, their gnarled trunks draped in moss like funeral shrouds. The air was heavy, the light dimming as the canopy thickened. Silence returned, oppressive and unnatural, the absence of birdsong a weight on my chest. I marked trees with my knife, small cuts to guide us back, a breadcrumb trail against the forest's disorienting sameness. The trail grew sparse, the buck slowing, its blood less frequent. It's bleeding out, Michael said, pointing to a smear on a fallen log. Close now. The trail led to a thicket, the air cold enough to cloud my breath, strange for early autumn. We approached cautiously, rifles raised, the stillness heavy as if the forest itself held its breath. Michael pushed through the branches and froze, his body rigid. I moved beside him, and my breath caught. The buck lay in a depression, its body splayed open, entrails arranged in deliberate patterns, spirals and lines that seemed to pulse with intent, like symbols from a language I couldn't read. A perfect circular incision marked its abdomen, identical to the one at the abandoned camp, its edges impossibly smooth. The scene wasn't the work of a predator. It was calculated, ritualistic, wrong. We need to leave, I whispered, stepping back, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Michael nodded, his face pale, his eyes reflecting the same horror I felt. A branch snapped nearby, loud in the silence. 20 yards away, something moved, a dark, impossibly tall shape, its limbs too thin, bent at angles that defied anatomy. It shifted with jerky, eye-straining motion, like a film reel skipping frames, its form flickering between solid and translucent. Run! Michael hissed. We bolted, crashing through the forest, branches tearing at our skin, roots snagging our boots. The thing pursued, its movements impossibly fast, the crashing of brush growing louder, closer. I glanced back, a mistake. Its body was too long, too angular, its skin shifting to reveal intricate machinery beneath, like clockwork or circuitry from another world. Its featureless face bore circular patterns, glowing faintly, matching the wounds on the deer. The scream came again, tearing through my skull, a blend of tearing metal and electric static, a sound that didn't belong on Earth. Keep going, I shouted, my military training kicking in. Adrenaline surged, my focus narrowing to survival, one foot in front of the other, faster, don't look back. We veered toward camp, then abandoned the plan, aiming for the truck. The creature's screams shifted, coming from multiple directions, hurting us like prey. We reached a ridge, scrambling up its steep slope, grabbing roots and saplings to pull ourselves higher. The thing circled below, cutting off our path, its movements deliberate, predatory. We slid down the other side, the forest thinning as we neared the service road. The screams grew angrier, closer, echoing from all sides. We burst onto the dirt path, the truck a quarter-mile away, its blue metal gleaming in the fading light. We're going to make it, Michael gasped, hope flickering in his voice. Then the scream came again, directly ahead. The creature stepped onto the road, towering over us, its limbs defying anatomy, its skin shifting like liquid circuitry, its featureless face tilted, the circular patterns pulsing with a cold, alien light. My mind rebelled, unable to process its form. Too tall, too thin, too wrong. Oh God! Michael whispered, his voice cracking. It raised an arm, pointing at us, the circles glowing brighter, pulsing in a pattern that felt like a language I couldn't decipher. I froze, my military training useless against a threat that defied comprehension. Then, from behind, the sound of engines and voices, hikers or hunters approaching the trailhead. The creature turned, its head tilting at an impossible angle, then vanished into the trees with a speed that hurt my eyes. "Now!" I shouted, dragging Michael to the truck. He fumbled the keys, dropping them in his panic. I watched the tree lean, expecting the thing to return. The engine roared to life, and we sped away, gravel flying, the forest blurring past. Something moved in the trees, keeping pace for a moment before falling behind. Only when we hit the highway, surrounded by the normalcy of other cars, did I breathe again. We didn't speak, the silence heavy with what we'd seen. Michael's hands tight on the wheel, my own still trembling. A week later, I sat on my apartment balcony, a warm beer untouched in my hand. The city lights below a stark contrast to the darkness of those woods. Sleep was a stranger now, my nights haunted by nightmares of the creature's impossible form, its circular patterns glowing in the dark, the scream that seemed to come from inside my skull. Michael texted daily, his messages clinging to normalcy, work, his kids' baseball games, the weather, but never mentioning the forest. I couldn't blame him. He had a family, a life to protect. I had only questions. Our one conversation since that day was brief, strained. As he dropped me off at my apartment, he'd stared through the windshield, his voice flat. "Let's just forget about it. Bad trip, bad weather. That's all people need to know." "You think that's possible?" I'd asked, noticing the new gray hairs at his temples. "To just forget? I have a family," he'd said, his voice cracking. "I can't." I understood. What place did our experience have in the ordinary world? How could we explain it to anyone who hadn't seen those circular wounds, heard that scream, felt the forest's malevolent gaze? So I nodded, grabbed my gear, and watched him drive away. My apartment became a war room, its walls a mosaic of printouts, maps, and notes connected by red string. A madman's tapestry. I pored over local newspaper archives, online forums, historical records, chasing patterns in the disappearances that plagued those woods. Rick Martinez's story was the key that unlocked the horror. He'd returned alone, his friends gone, his mind unraveling with drawings of a tall, thin creature with circular markings. He'd vanished from a locked house, his walls etched with those same patterns, as if he'd tried to capture the thing that haunted him. But Rick wasn't alone. I found 5 similar cases spanning 30 years, people who returned from the woods changed, speaking of impossible things before disappearing. A woman in 1992 filled notebooks with descriptions of a creature that matched what we'd seen. Her words frantic, obsessive. She vanished 3 weeks after her trip. Hunters reported animal mutilations dating back to the 1970s. Deer, elk, even bears, all marked with perfect circular wounds. Rangers blamed poachers or cults, but the consistency across decades suggested something older, something beyond human explanation. Each night, I sat at my coffee table, the article about Rick Martinez open before me. The headline read, "Local hunter missing. Strange circumstances puzzle authorities." His photo showed a bearded man in flannel, smiling beside a deer he'd bagged, unaware of the fate awaiting him. His cousin spoke of his obsession with perfect circles, and a creature that moved all wrong, like it wasn't really there. A neighbor heard him screaming in his sleep about something hunting them. The pattern was undeniable, a thread of horror woven through decades, hidden in plain sight. I rubbed my eyes, the burn of sleeplessness a constant companion. My military training had taught me to face threats head-on, to understand my enemy's tactics, weaknesses, capabilities. But this defied understanding. The more I researched, the more I realized it wasn't of this world, or perhaps it was, existing in the blind spots of our perception, a predator we weren't equipped to confront. My hunting background had made me comfortable with the idea that humans were apex predators, masters of the wild. Those woods had stripped that illusion away. We weren't at the top of the food chain. We just hadn't met the thing that was. I dismantled my investigation board, not because I doubted its truth, but because I'd reached a dead end. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. Some predators weren't meant to be hunted. I sealed the notes, maps, and articles in a cardboard box, unable to burn them. Maybe someday someone else would come looking for answers, and my findings, incomplete as they were, might help them avoid our fate, or at least understand what they faced. I vowed never to return to those Tennessee woods. The world was vast, with other forests to explore, other hunts to pursue, but the memory of that creature, its impossible limbs, its glowing circular patterns, its scream that shook reality, would linger. Some places were better left undisturbed, some hunts better left unfinished. On quiet nights, when the city grew still, I would hear that scream again, feel the forest's gaze, and know that we'd been spared not by skill or courage, but by chance. Have you ever felt the weight of an unseen gaze in the wilderness? A presence that made the air itself feel alive with menace? What would you do if you found an abandoned camp, its occupants gone without a trace? Would you search for answers, or heed the forest's warning and flee?